was. And I sort of made the connection between, being an architect, growing up to become an architect and actually helping to heal communities by improving the building. So there was a very specific building in downtown Detroit at the time called the Hudson's Department Store.
Oh, yeah.
It actually closed. Okay, yeah. So I think a lot of people are familiar. It's a sort of iconic name here in Detroit. And the building, the main one that was in downtown, closed the year that I was born. So I never actually experienced it as a place of commerce, but it was just it was a whole city block. And, just growing up, it was boarded up and graffiti, and people were who were kind of around the building were probably unhoused, and it just felt it was sort of a symptom of a larger set of issues. So I sort of said, let me become an architect so I can fix this building and other buildings and help to heal the people. Now, the Hudson's Department Store in downtown Detroit was actually demolished when I was in high school, so I did not get to work on that, but I'm actually really pleased all these decades later to see Detroit making a pretty significant turnaround. But anyway, back to sort of how I got on this path. So I went to, I got a scholarship so I come from very humble beginnings in Detroit, and I got a scholarship to go to boarding school at Cranbrook.
Mm-hmm.
And so Cranbrook is a school that has a very, serious focus on the arts and other things, but I was especially attracted to the architecture of the campus and the availability of art classes so I could put together my portfolio. And then I eventually went off to Cornell to study architecture. And so that's when my horizons expanded even more. And, I've been on this path since, I guess, 1994, and I'm just really excited to be, stepping into this role with the AIA. I've actually lived in 7 different cities over the course of my life, Detroit obviously being the beginning, but then Ithaca, New York. I studied abroad in Rome. I lived in Washington, D.C., New York City, Cambridge, Massachusetts. When I got my master's in public administration at Harvard, I was a Sheila C. Johnson Fellow there, which was a beautiful experience. In fact, I just saw Ms. Johnson the other day in Chicago on her book tour. So for those of you who want to check out her book, Walk Through Fire, please do that. It's amazing. And then I came back to Detroit, actually. I worked in city government, taught at University of Michigan. And then I actually returned to a firm that I worked for earlier in my career, a firm called HOK, so that I could work on large-scale projects that are having an impact on communities. So some of the projects HOK is known for that most people probably have heard of are the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta and LaGuardia Terminal B's expansion. So airports, hospitals, schools, all kinds of large-scale projects, which is the scale that I like to work at. In fact, my very first project at HOK was an airport in Doha. So those are the things that I kind of do for my day job.
Right.
But my volunteer role really started with NOMA, which is the National Organization of Minority Architects. Founded in 1971, I joined as a student back in 2004 for the student design competition and was invited to join the national board right after I graduated. So that's where I really got to grow as a leader, at the national level for architecture. And then I was encouraged to run for president of NOMA in 2019. Actually, it was a few years before that, but I actually served as president in 2019 and 2020. And during that time, I really wanted to be intentional about the messaging of what, not just what NOMA did, but what architects did, and how do we, increase our membership, help to build a pipeline of people coming into the profession. There actually, to this day, there's only 2,532 Black architects in the United States. There's a total of 120,000 approximately in the U.S. It's actually not that large of a profession. There are more attorneys just in the state of California than there are architects. But of that number, just over 2,500 are Black. And of that number, only 593 are Black women. And about 10 years ago, when I became a licensed architect, I was number 295. And we all know our number because there's so few of us, and we kind of all know each other.
Yeah.
So I did a pretty good job as president of NOMA, nearly tripled our membership and, really kind of raised the organization's profile. And I think the folks at AIA took notice. And I've been an AIA member since the beginning of my career as well. I just really took more of a leadership role with NOMA throughout my career. So some of the mentors and other folks around AI that I've had said you really need to run in late 2021, and I decided to go ahead and do that in early 22, and the election results were in my favor. So June 22 is when I was elected, and I've had the last year and a half to kind of ramp up to what we'll be celebrating next month as my inauguration as the 100th president of the AIA.
Wow.
So really, really excited about this opportunity, and not just to be, a figurehead for my race and gender, but actually to make some progress, and to inspire people. In fact, I got a letter from a young lady, second-year student at an HBCU. She said, "Because you won, I feel like my dreams are possible." And that's when it really became, it was already real to me, but that
Sure.
really grounded it, that, I represent something so much bigger than myself.
Yeah. I did not want to interrupt. Didn't want to interrupt because I wanted you to get that out, and I asked the question about the backstory, so I wanted the audience to hear, and I wanted to learn even more about your backstory. And so there are a few things I learned there that I didn't even know in my preparation for this conversation. So there you have it. Kimberly Dowdell is not just the first Black woman to lead AIA, but she is the 100th president of AIA. So all these great numbers bouncing around today. 100. Would you say 239 was your number? You said 239 is your
295.
295. So all these numbers I got floating in my head right now. A couple things I want to go back and unpack right quick. She mentioned, Kimberly did, Sheila C. Johnson's book. I know Miss Johnson well. Many of you know I started my career on television at BET many years ago. And she, of course, was the wife then of Bob Johnson. They founded BET, and her book really is a fascinating read. I'm going to try to get her on the program here when I can find a date that works for both of us. But it's a fascinating story of all that she did to help build that network, and she's done so much other great work since then as a philanthropist. So speaking again of powerful Black women, this show today is all about powerful Black women. Julianne Malveaux, Kimberly Dowdell, Nikki Giovanni in our final hour today. But that book from Sheila Johnson, I highly recommend. As Kimberly did a moment ago, I just wanted to put a pin on that, put a final point on that, rather. That said, there's so many things you said that I want to sort of pick apart if I can. One, you said you lived in 7 cities, and I'm just curious. I'm actually messing with you, but I'm just curious about this as well. Which is, of the 7 cities that you mentioned that you've lived in, which one had architecture that you found most stunning? The architecture of the city you found most stunning in what city?
That's a dangerous question.
I know. That's why I asked
Smiley.
it. That's why I asked it.
So actually, I may have missed, as I was going through my list, I may have missed a key city, which is Chicago, which is actually where I live right now.
Okay.
New York and Chicago they take architecture very, very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I had studied abroad in Rome, and that's like a whole different situation, because we're talking about antiquity and design. So that's kind of off to the side. But in terms of the U.S. context, I think Chicago takes architecture super, super seriously. New York obviously has really, really amazing architecture. So I would put those two at the top of my list.
So what's
they're both wonderful cities.
What's funny about that is that we agree in that regard. And I've said this. I'm not saying it now just because you said it, but my friends know I've had this conversation many times. For years, I have maintained, and I'm sometimes the lonely person in this conversation, the odd man out, as it were, the outlier. But I, for years, have maintained that the Chicago skyline I find much more fascinating than the New York skyline. And New York is a beautiful skyline. But when it comes to just pure architecture, and you stand back and look at that thing, the Chicago skyline to me is infinitely more intriguing to me than the New York skyline. Now, not trying to get you in trouble, but would you argue me on that point?
I think they're both beautiful in their own unique ways.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm not going to get in trouble on that one.
Yeah, she's
actually,
not taking the bait.
My initial licensure was in New York, or is in New York State.
Right.
So I definitely, and I spent probably the majority of my professional career in New York. So great city, great energy, very dynamic. Chicago, also amazing. Also just the asset of having Lake Michigan right there is a super, super unique element. So just I celebrate architecture in both cities. They both take it seriously. But I think you're right. Chicago did innovate on a lot of different fronts.
Yeah.
Especially with the first skyscraper.
Yep.
That's a big deal. So. Shout out to Chicago and New York.
Fair enough. You're the president of the AIA,
Yeah.
so I don't want to get you in any trouble. I'll let that go. Let me ask the penultimate question. And you knew this was coming. You mentioned those numbers. 2,530, as I recall. 593 women. You're number 295 as a black woman. Why, even to this day, are there so few African Americans in your chosen field of architecture?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is not having a lot of awareness around what architecture is or what architects do. I was very fortunate in that, I took an art class in middle school where I learned what an architect did. In fact, I'll just tell a short story on that. Our art teacher gave us all a shoebox and said to make an apartment or, make some kind of space, like a little model. And so I took little carpet samples and blocks and, made the space. And that's what sort of introduced me to the power of design. Like, I can decide I want this to go here and that to go here. And that's how this will work.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an empowering moment. And because of that, that's how I made the connection between, that small scale project to, eventually, hopefully revitalizing the Hudson Department Store, which didn't come to fruition. And that's actually one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about arts and education. As you probably know, a lot of schools have taken out funding for the arts. And so I think particularly in Black communities, it's important that we make sure that young people are exposed to it. And that's actually, that's the reason why I'm not just a board member, but board chair for an organization in Chicago called Ingenuity, which works to ensure that all Chicago public school students have access to a high-quality arts education. But back to the answer, not even knowing what an architect is a barrier, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so in order to apply to architecture school, you have to have a portfolio. And so if you are, let's say even you're a senior in high school and you find out what architecture is about and you start to apply, you have a lot of work to do to make up for, probably the last 2 years that you maybe weren't taking art classes and creating content for your portfolio. So that's another barrier. And then once you get in, it's actually one of the more expensive things to study. It's 5, 6, or 7 years of education. Plus you have to have the materials to build the models, and you have to have the best of technology to run, all the different software programs that are necessary. And so to some extent, it's a profession of privilege. Yeah. And, as I mentioned earlier, I come from humble beginnings, but I was very resourceful when it came to getting scholarships and raising funds to support, what I needed to do. But, not everyone is going to have that ability. So I think that's another thing that's a factor. And then another piece is, and a lot of people don't know this, but the average salary of an architect is not nearly what I think it should be, or, what I think a lot of people would expect it to be. Mm-hmm. It's around, I think for a licensed architect right now in the U.S., the average starting salary is around 89, or not starting salary, the average salary is around 89,000. And then for starting salaries, it's in the 50s. Mm. And so if you look at the expense of the education and then, what one might look at making when they're coming out of school, and then even years later, once they get their license, it just becomes less attractive from a financial standpoint. Yeah. So you have to, have some privilege and also just have a lot of passion. And also, I mean, you have to have the ability to draw and to, be creative, and there's definitely some math involved. It's a somewhat unique profile of a person who, can successfully pursue architecture. But I think that it could be a wider pool of people if we were more intentional about building that pipeline. In fact, NOMA, the organization I mentioned earlier, mm-hmm. created a program called NOMA Project Pipeline. In fact, I'm wearing a NOMA Project Pipeline T-shirt right now. And basically, it was founded in 2005 in an effort to expose middle school and high school students to architecture, so they could see architects who look like them, understand that it's a viable profession, and get resources to understand how to apply and how to be successful. Mm-hmm. So one of the things I want to do with AIA is actually help find ways, and I realize I probably can't accomplish this in just 1 year, so hopefully it kind of plants the seeds for future development, but finding ways to improve business models for architecture firms so that we can actually improve those outcomes relative to salary.
When we come forward, I want to come to this issue that you raised a moment ago, and I love this phrase, the power of design. I am curious, as an architect and as a black woman, no less, how you see the power of design. What is the power of design? That statement resonates with me, again, because I'm a fan of architecture. But what, to your mind, is the power of design? I mentioned Walter Blackburn earlier, who was the father of my college roommate, Kai Blackburn, brilliant architect who built the Freedom Center. Designed it in Cincinnati and a number of other things in his career. But we'll talk about Paul Williams when we come forward, Paul Revere Williams to be exact, the brilliant black architect. We'll talk about Frank Gehry, interesting story I want to share with Kimberly Dowdell about Frank Gehry, who's a personal friend of mine, and some other stuff I want to cover as we celebrate in this hour the first black woman to ascend to the presidency of the American Institute of Architects, the AIA. Her name is Kimberly Dowdell. You're listening to her right now on Tavis Smiley.
You're listening to Tavis Smiley. Tavis Smiley. Ranked number 45 on the Heavy 100 list of the 100 most important radio talk show hosts in America.
What's up, party people? It's your favorite MC's favorite rapper, MC Light here. And we're celebrating 50 years of hip-hop, authentically powered by Cadillac. And we're going to take it way back to where it started. It was only fitting that hip-hop began with teenagers at a back-to-school jam in the rec room of a South Bronx apartment complex by an 18-year-old brother. By the way, I'm also sure he had a Cadillac parked outside. He noticed the energy on the dance floor when he switched between two turntables, extending the beats, repeating the breaks, and never losing the rhythms. And that was the birth of hip-hop. And from that moment, it took off.
For more on how Cadillac is celebrating hip-hop's 50th, visit Cadillac.com/audacity.
We welcome you to a Thursday. It's November 16th. I'm Mike Moore. Now here's the latest from the Black Information Network. A code of ethics is being adopted by the U.S. Supreme Court. The justices say it's an effort to strengthen the public's confidence in the nation's highest court. Democrats have been pushing for ethics reform following reports of justices taking high-priced trips and accepting other benefits from wealthy donors. In Massachusetts, a new Citizens for Juvenile Justice report has provided details of disciplinary patterns at Springfield schools and found that students of color are disproportionately subjected to disciplinary action, which includes arrests. Black students make up about 18% of the school population, but they account for nearly a quarter of those disciplined and 50% of the arrests. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Major problem working in Lakeview Terrace on the 210 West at Wheatland Avenue. All lanes are blocked now. One vehicle went over the side there. Traffic jamming up at Sunland Boulevard. In Torrance, 405 South at Normandy Avenue, a stalled vehicle blocking the carpool lane. Heavy there from Artesia Boulevard. And in Monterey Park, 710 North at the 10, an accident on the shoulder was slowing from Cesar Chavez.
Looking for a better way to get around LA? SoCal 511 gives you real-time traffic alerts to help you find faster ways to get around LA County. It's totally free and helps motorists easily find Fast Track and roadside assistance services. Visit go511.com or dial 511 on your phone.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
A dismal night for the Lakers at Crypto.com. They lose at home by 15 to the Sacramento Kings. The Lakers committed 23 turnovers. 11 of those turnovers belong to LeBron and Anthony Davis. Get ready to hear some talk in the streets about the Lakers making a trade. The Lakers reportedly are one of 4 teams interested in swinging a deal for Chicago Bulls guard Zach LaVine. The former UCLA star is not happy in Chicago. The Bulls are off to a 4-8 start. We'll keep you updated on this development. Golden State's Draymond Green was suspended for the 5th time in his career. This time, the NBA sat him down for 5 games for putting Minnesota center Rudy Gobert in a chokehold Tuesday night. The suspension will cost Green $1.36 million. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
race, culture wars, political turf battles, criminal justice and injustice, the courts. These are the conversations you won't hear elsewhere. My guests are leading journalists, celebrities, and sports figures, elected leaders, and influencers. They aren't afraid to get into it and say the quiet part out loud. With Areva Martin in real time, your commute just became the most engaging part of your day. Tune in weekdays from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. or find us on YouTube. Areva Martin in real time, when you want it straight, no chaser.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black. This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580.
Do you have both Medi-Cal and Medicare? The new LA Care health plan called LA Care Medicare Plus, HMO DSNP, can help you get the most out of your health plan for $0 premium. LA Care is here to provide Angelenos with access to quality health care at an affordable cost. For $0 premium, you can get full benefits from vision coverage and in-home support services to prescription drug coverage, plus more. Call 855-688-1479. 855-688-1479. November is National Runaway Prevention and Homeless Youth Awareness Month, and the Sanctuary of Hope is shining a light on the situations that cause youth to run away or face a housing crisis. In LA County, nearly 3,000 youth are homeless on the streets each night. All month long, the Sanctuary of Hope will lead activities throughout LA County to inform and mobilize calls for action, and you can help. For more info, go to www.thesoh.org. That's www.thesoh.org.
Let's get back to more of this rich dialogue with Tavis Smiley.
We will talk to Nikki Giovanni in our third and final hour today, but we continue our conversation now. Speaking of brilliant black women, accomplished black women, we continue our dialogue now with Kimberly Dowdell, who is about to become the first black woman to be the president of the AIA, the American Institute of Architects. That's high cotton, as we say around here, and we are celebrating her in this hour, learning more about her backstory and what she intends to do in this coveted position as the first black woman to lead the AIA. So, Kimberly, I was saying earlier, if you walk in my office on the coffee table near my desk, the first thing you see is a book that focuses on the brilliant work of Paul Revere Williams, the brilliant black architect who, of course, known in this city and indeed around the nation, around the world. And you think of all the things that Paul Revere Williams built in this city that people have frequented for years. His involvement with the Spider, that's that piece of artwork at the center of the airport at LAX.
Absolutely.
With the restaurant on top. Iconic. You think about the Polo Lounge at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Paul Williams did that. And I love telling this story for those who don't know. Of course, you know this. But Paul Revere Williams was such an amazing architect back in the day. When segregation was alive, even in this city of Los Angeles. This radio program is heard across the nation, but we're flagship here in L.A. By the way, Kimberly, you'll be fascinated to know that this studio is just about a mile and a half down the street from the home that Paul Revere Williams built and lived in. That's how close the studio is right now where I sit to the home of Paul Williams. But Paul Williams was so accomplished back in the day that everybody in this city, all the rich white people in Beverly Hills and Holmby Hills and beyond, everybody wanted to have Paul Williams design a home for them. But nobody wanted to get too close to this black man. True story. Paul Revere Williams had to sit across the table when discussing his design plans for his white clients. He couldn't sit next to them. He had to sit across the table from them, and he became so adept at his craft that he learned to draw upside down. He learned to draw. And that is
not an easy thing.
He learned to draw upside down, and in so doing, built homes all over this city. And today, as you know, there is a premium on Paul Revere Williams homes. I tried to buy one years ago in my neck of the woods, Hancock Park, where I lived for a couple of decades, and I couldn't get one, but I bought a house right next to a Paul Williams house. That was as close as I could get. But everybody in this town, I mean, his homes go for outrageous sums because all these years later, he's now respected and regarded. But when you hear that story that you already know, that this black man had to learn to draw upside down to be the regarded Williams that he is today. That story strikes you how all these years later?
I mean, it's amazing because, first of all, drawing upside down is really hard. Drawing just straight on is not necessarily the easiest thing. So like I mentioned, it's a lot to be an architect, but then to have to go through these extra steps as a black person, 100 years ago. In fact, I'm pleased to report that Paul Revere Williams was actually the first black member of the AIA in 1923. So 100 years ago is when Mr. Williams became an AIA member. So I'm really happy, that we're able to celebrate.
To put a finer point on that, he became a member 100 years ago, the first black member, and the first black woman to be president of that organization is their 100th president. I'm just trying to connect these dots here.
Poetic.
Yes.
It's poetic.
There you go.
Speaking of numbers. So I'm actually the third black person. So there were two black men. Mr. Marshall Purnell was the first AIA president who was black in 2008. And then Mr. William Bates, or Bill Bates, he was president in 2019 while I was president of NOMA. So we got to work together for that year. And it was wonderful just, learning from them. And so I like to say I stand on the shoulders of giants. Also, I'm the seventh woman. The very first woman was a woman by the name of Susan Maxman in 1992, which also was not really that long ago for the MC to have its first woman. And totally separate from the AI conversation, but my line number is number 7. So I there's some
go on and shout out the sorority. Shout it out.
That would be the Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. So I just wanted to share all these connections that I think are quite poetic.
We love the AKs. I ain't mad at you.
Yeah.
Let me ask you how it is to navigate a profession that is so white and male. And I know something of this. Because talk radio is, I call it a conservative citadel. What we're doing here and across the country is uniquely different because it is a white male-dominated field. This ain't the first field I've been in throughout my career that is white male-dominated. But to your point, first woman doesn't show up to 92, first black man a few years after that. I mean, so my point is that this is still an overwhelmingly white male field. How do black people, black women no less, navigate that sort of terrain, that kind of territory?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a challenge, which is why the numbers look like what they do. But I would say that I've been very fortunate in that I was connected to NOMA very early on as a student, and then also the resources of the AIA. And like with many things, the more you put into your professional organizations, generally the more you get out of it. And so I invested a lot in NOMA, especially. But also having membership in AIA throughout my career has helped me to just have access to information, know how to navigate the licensure process, which is quite intense. And I mean, just the power of mentorship and sponsorship. So at my firm, HOK, I've had some really great mentors, but also one sponsor in particular who just made sure that I kind of got what I needed as an employee and now a shareholder with the company. Like, it's important to have those champions, and they may not look like you. Yeah. But you've got to be open to asking for help, or be open to receiving help when someone sees something in you and they want to help you. Yeah. So, have those conversations, figure out how to navigate the corporate world. And I would say I work for a large firm, but I've also have experience with being an owner of a small firm and navigating some of those challenges. And I have many friends who own small design firms. And there are real challenges there with gaining, access to certain contracts. And that's actually one of the things that we were working on. Well, they're still working on it at NOMA. I'm just no longer on the board. But, finding ways to help small business owners, in particular Black business owners of architecture firms, get access to the clientele that will help their businesses excel to the next level. And even at my firm, HOK, we created a program called HOK Tapestry to help us work with smaller firms and help to kind of get their get their businesses more support. So to kind of further answer your question, I think it's definitely a challenge to, one, get into the profession and navigate, some of the challenges of getting work and remaining profitable. But you've got to really lean on your network. I think that's one of the most critical things.
Speaking of leaning on your network, this is a story I've never told publicly, and I'm only doing it now because I'm talking to Kimberly Dowdell, who's a history maker herself. But I mentioned earlier that I've had the honor over the course of my career to become personal friends with the brilliant architect Frank Gehry, who, of course, is based here in L.A., Santa Monica to be exact. Everybody knows Frank Gehry. He designed Disney Hall in Los Angeles. He designed Bilbao, the Guggenheim, and so many other great projects. Everybody knows Frank Gehry, who may be regarded at the moment as the world's greatest living architect. One could debate that, but I think Frank Gehry would certainly be on the short list, if not at the top of the list. And so I've interviewed Frank Gehry any number of times over the years. We became friends. I love going to his office every so often. Kimberly, I'll just call him every now and then, go to his office just to look at the models. I just love walking around to look at the models that are in his office of the things that he's working on. And speaking of your network helping you out, again, this program is heard across the nation in syndication, but I'm based in L.A., and when I went out a couple years ago to buy this radio station in L.A. and to build this Black-owned talk radio network that we're building every day, a number of my friends stepped up and contributed money to help me get this thing off the ground. And I am pleased to say that Frank Gehry wrote a very sizable check as a gift to help me get this station off the ground in L.A. So talk about leading into your network. I shared that story. I never shared it before, but Frank Gehry was one of the persons who helped me get this thing off the ground here in L.A., and I am deeply indebted to the brilliant architect Frank Gehry. When we come forward, more of our conversation with the new president of AIA, Kimberly Dowdell, on Tavis Smiley.
Seeking the truth, speaking the truth. This is the Tavis Smiley Show.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
Environmental justice, pollution, and climate. In Los Angeles and across America, people of color are suffering and dying from disproportionate health impacts on a planet that has less than 10 years to prevent irreversible damage. Heat illnesses, respiratory illnesses, water-related illnesses, food system impacts, insect-related diseases, Black maternal health, and mental health effects. As the impacts of climate change mount, millions of vulnerable people, our people, are going to bear the brunt of these extreme environmental events, which will likely lead to forced displacement, loss of cultural identity, and other related risks. These realities are as real as rain. Stay tuned to KBLA Talk 1580 for more details about the most progressive multimedia and live events campaign any Black media outlet has ever undertaken to combat the climate catastrophe. Experts, events, empowerment. It's all on the way from unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580. We don't black down. We level up.
Level up, 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 level up.
At Susan G. Komen, we believe that ending breast cancer needs all of us working together. Because if you've just been diagnosed and don't know where to turn, we've got you. If you can't afford the treatment you need, we've got you. And if you are driven to honor the loved one you've just lost, we have a place for you here. Because of you, we're supporting those who need help today while tirelessly searching for tomorrow's cures. Visit Komen.org and be a part of our Susan G. Komen community today.
Sounds different, huh? This is Tavis Smiley.
Tavis Smiley and Kimberly Dowdell, the new president of the American Institute of Architects, the AIA, first black woman to be so honored. I should say they are so honored to have her as their incoming president in just a few weeks from now. Watching my time is getting tight on me. Let me kind of weave two things together. You talked earlier about, use this phrase, the power of design. As an architect, as a black woman architect, what to your mind is the power of design, number one? I ask that in part because here in L.A. and other places I've traveled around the country, we have a bad habit of just tearing stuff down. I'm not sure that we really believe in celebrating some of these iconic structures that have in fact been built, and people have to fight like the devil to get certain things declared, local monuments or preserved. So I'm not sure that we appreciate stuff the way they do in a place like Rome where you once lived. So to your mind, what is the power of design? And then later I want to ask you how AI, speaking of AIA, how AI is going to impact the work of the AIA and architects in the years to come. But that first question, what is the power of design as you see it?
So I'm totally going to answer the question. I did want to say congratulations to you on being a trailblazer. I'm glad that Frank Gehry, wrote a significant check to help you get where you are, and I just want to celebrate you for a second.
Thank you.
So the next thing, I think about Frank Gehry. And many other architects have done some amazing work that's iconic, that's provocative, and you can tell that there's a real relationship between art and science. Like architecture at its best elevates the human experience and sort of carefully blends art and science. And I think Frank Gehry's work is an example of that. Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about the power of design, I think about how architecture, it really does sort of, it's an indicator of the health of a place in many ways. Mm-hmm. And, you talked about buildings getting torn down. I mean, that definitely was a part of the story, and still continues to be so today in Detroit, my hometown. And it makes me think of a sort of well-known saying that the most sustainable building is the one that already exists. And that kind of reminds me to mention the AIA's two key strategic priorities. One is climate action, and two is equity, specifically racial, ethnic, and gender equity. How do we make sure that we are a more equitable profession so that we can actually reflect the society that we serve? Mm-hmm. And so I also think about health disparities a lot because, as I mentioned, I wanted to be a doctor very early and then changed at 11. So, in Chicago, where I live now, on the north side of Chicago, the average life expectancy is about 90 years old. And on the south side of Chicago, which I think most people know is a predominantly black community, the average life expectancy is 60 years old. So there's a 30-year life expectancy gap in Chicago. And we see those numbers all around the country. Mm-hmm. And I think about, blight as another indicator of sort of a lack of health. And, I really think it's important that, cities and other types of governmental organizations and philanthropic organizations work with the private sector to address these issues so that we can actually improve our health outcomes. And one of the things that I'm looking to advance through the AIA next year is creating a chief architect program to actually help mayors identify architects that can be a key advisor to help them think through, their climate action solutions, equity solutions, as well as health equity. Mm-hmm. So those are some of the things that come to mind when I think about architecture and the potential to elevate the human experience. And just one quick story, I actually had an opportunity to serve on the Mayor's Institute of Design, sort of a workshop to help mayors understand the power of design in their own cities. They would present a case study, and then experts would help advise them. And the mayor of Monroe, Louisiana, and this was a few years ago, and he's still mayor. His name is Friday Ellis. So Mayor Friday Ellis said something I thought was brilliant. He said, "See beautiful, feel beautiful." And I think we have to really think about how our cities, our communities are looking and how they actually help to contribute to the health of our people.
When we come forward, our remaining moments with Kimberly Dowdell, her thoughts on AI and what that means for the future of architecture. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Hope, agency, dignity. This is Tavis Smiley.
Can you dig it? Come on!
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
When breaking news happens, keep it locked to KBLA Talk 1580.
So pleased to announce that the 43rd mayor of the city of Los Angeles is on the phone. Mayor Karen Bass, good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing, Dominique?
Good. You must be incredibly swamped right now, and I appreciate you checking in. It's indefinitely what we're hearing, that the 10 freeway to be down?
Yes, that is the case. All of those travel apps, pay attention to those. As we get information, they've been uploaded right away. So those maps should be accurate. But we actually are trying to tell people to stay on freeways, to follow the route, because our streets can't handle 300,000.
Yeah.
Our streets would be parking lots. There is metro, there is public transportation. So they're increasing the frequency of trains and increasing the frequency of buses. So you can go to 511 and learn about metro. You can go to emergency.lacity.gov to learn about any information on the city. This is a time for all of us to stay together. We're trying every avenue possible. That's why it's so important that you reached out, Dominique. Always want to make sure that the KBLA audience is up to speed.
Mayor Karen Bass, thank you so much. Godspeed.
All right, thank you.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
Ask any former youth in foster care what they missed most while growing up, and they will most likely answer, someone to show me unconditional love. Now, isn't that something we all wished we could experience? Here in Los Angeles, up to 40% of homeless youth on our streets identify as LGBTQ+. The most prevalent reason for homelessness among this population is the rejection they've experienced from their own families. The LA County Department of Children and Family Services and Raise a Child are searching for safe, nurturing, and affirming foster parents within our community willing to stand up and serve all children and youth in foster care, especially LGBTQ youth. Learn the many benefits to becoming a foster parent. Attend a free Raise a Child virtual or in-person informational event to learn more. RSVP now at raiseachild.org. That's raiseachild.org. And thank you.
Ready to re-examine your assumptions and expand your inventory of ideas? More of Tavis Smiley coming your way right now.
Kimberly Dardell, I've enjoyed celebrating you immensely in this hour. I've only got 2 minutes left. Your thoughts right quick on the future of AI and architecture. It's impacting everything else in our world.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, architecture is right at the intersection of art and science, and I think it really takes a human touch to get architecture right. But I think that AI can be a tool that architects use to increase productivity and cut down on time. Mm-hmm. And I have to give credit to the AI staff for actually having a group of folks that are working on this, both on the staff side and on the volunteer leadership side. And also I want to shout out our CEO, Lakeisha Ann Woods, who's also a Black woman. She just started in her role at AIA as the first Black woman, actually first Black CEO of the organization, who keeps things going from year to year. And so she's very focused on this issue, as well as our current president, Emily Grandstaff-Rice, who's been a mentor to me, and she'll be president for the next 4 weeks. And so as a group, the three of us, we talk about these issues, and we think that while there is certainly a threat because it's unknown, like many industries are navigating, we feel confident that the value that architects create cannot be replaced entirely by these tools, but the tools can actually in an ideal scenario, help us to really propel our work forward in a significant way.
In the 30 seconds I have left, I don't need to color this question much more than this, but in 30 seconds, what would you say to Black folk about their participation in the arts?
Oh, I mean, I come from a family of artists, so I am 100%, in support of Black people expressing themselves and consuming arts. My older sister, Sabrina Nelson, is a profound artist in Detroit, as is her son, Mario Moore, so look them both up. And, I think that, the arts are, they reflect our soul, they reflect our culture, and I think we have to invest in the arts. We have to make sure young people are getting that exposure and that, people are being cultivated to create, the world that we want to see. And I think architecture is a part of that.
Kimberly Dowdell is the incoming president of the American Institute of Architects, the AIA, making her the first Black woman to hold this coveted and esteemed position. Kimberly, congratulations. All the best to you in the coming months and years. And thank you for the chance to talk to you today.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too. More Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.